and housing is one of them.
It's time for the third edition of Housing Baraza, celebrating housing champions.
Housing is one of the key indicators of the country's growth and development, and so the personal standards of living.
If we are to house ourselves, and we should, and we are, how can we do it in a more sustainable way?
In the discussions, we've always talked about the price tag of a product. And the price equation is clear. It starts all the way from initiation of the idea.
We are talking about low-income border rider who takes home 15,000 a day. We've been able to give them money to build a home.
That means branding. We are talking about branding our country using houses.
Because what we need now is what can work for us as Ugandans. And if we don't innovate, or if we don't test and pilot, there is no way we're going to move forward.
We are in Housing Baraza because we feel like this is where we need to advocate the need for FTTH. FTTH means fiber to the home. This fiber needs to go to the home. Our homes needs to be very smart.
Basically, our theme is always building networks for life. And when we look at where we are in partnering with the Housing Baraza, it fits in perfectly well in the sense that we are seeing a transition in families and homes where people are more receptive to digital.
And for us, the Baraza is not just a pace setter, but a truly critical platform for us to discuss this very topical issue of housing. A topic that is near and dear to our hearts, to our livelihoods, to our people, to our communities, to our societies.
I note with gratitude that this year's NBS Housing Baraza edition is addressing the shortage of housing in the country, which is partly caused by increased urbanization. I am equally convinced that this edition will offer all stakeholders an opportunity to identify innovations, especially those that reduce on the cost of acquisition while increasing the quality of housing in the country.
We are saying as Next Media, can we have the discussion of housing top of the agenda?
Today is that we will partner with our friends in government to be able to create an enabling policy environment so that we can fast-track some of these interventions. We have the will. Ultimately, housing is one of those markets where you have 2.5 million housing units of a shortfall. Those are ready customers. We have interveners like our partners who are ready and are already investing in intervening in some of these situations. All we need is an enabling environment to be able to move and act.
It's very incredible when you think about what we have been through as a country in the last 2 years. The last two housing barazas have had to be had pretty much behind closed doors. And it's such a privilege to be able to actually meet again with people and be able to interact. And it's why our theme for this year is building a housing ecosystem, partnering to house generations. While watching that video, something was happening incredible on the stage that I thought I should bring you into, because it was very exciting to see my panelists talking about how they need to meet. Oh, I need to look for you, and exchanging business cards and saying, I've been looking for you, guy, where have you been? And that's what we're talking about in terms of partnering to house generations, because not only in terms of the people who are following us on Sanyuka TV and on NBS and online, but also especially for you as our key stakeholders to be able to talk to one another and have discussions on what we need to do to take this discussion to where it needs to go, because you're all at a level where you're influencing decisions, and what you do and say in tandem with each other then trickles down to that border man that we heard about in the video, who wants to be able to own a house on his own. And that's why we're excited to be doing this for the fourth year and hopefully for many, many years to come. As we start, of course, we have to start at the highest level, and this is the government and Commissioner Mugara. We have to come to you because everywhere that you look around the world, there's a lot of noise that has been made on the issue of climate change and its impact, and we've seen that. You have some people who might deny it for whatever reason they might, but we know here, our grandmothers have always told us about seasons. We've seen those change, so clearly we can see that there has been some change in terms of climate change and its impact. But when you think about it from the perspective, especially of housing and what that's like, what are some of the things that we are taking note of at national level? What discussions are you having at national level to make sure that that agenda is at the top of everyone who is involved in the housing sector at every level?
Thank you very much. This is on. Thank you for that question. And it's true, climate is changing, and it's changing rapidly. The heat is on. We can feel it. The weather has changed just today. We've seen rain, but the impact of that rain and where it is not the water that runs down all the paved surfaces and how it affects communities is what we are really saying we need to address, because climate will continue to change. It is transboundary. It has affected the whole globe. But how do we put into action steps to make sure that the communities at the ground level are not affected by the impacts of climate change? And so when you look at the housing arena, it is really the footprint of where the communities are, where they are housed, where they live, where they have their work to do, where they go to school, industries. How responsive have we built these houses, mindful that the climate will change? That is now the key discussion we have at policy level, and we are starting to mainstream climate change into our policies, guidelines for the sector. Actually, the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development has already provided guidelines of mainstreaming climate change into the urban development sector as well as local government sector, because it's a concept, it's an idea that people do not appreciate until they can feel and touch it. But once you feel the impacts, it's similar to identifying with the feeling. So we need to start raising that information about climate in terms of the risks that we are exposed to as a result of the changing climate. There are so many risks I can point out even just here. Those staircases, that staircase is too short. That's a risk. Somebody can trip and fall. Or this light is too bright. If my eyes are not good, that's a risk for somebody who is wearing specs like that. So how risk prepared are we? How risk informed are we putting the risk factor in our planning is what we are bringing to the discussion at policy level. And as far as the climate smart communities are concerned, this is also another topical issue. But it is until we, the policymakers and the partners in the built environment, start to explain to our communities that this is a choice of action to take seriously our environmental concerns within our neighborhood, that it becomes a climate smart community. It is more or less a classification or maybe like you would call a designation. You've been designated to the position of so and so. So we make choices and actions that should preserve our environment in a sustainable manner. So if it is a project by maybe National Housing, I'll use our national agency. National Housing sets up a project for 150 units. We need to check and also be aware as recipients of that public good and private good that there are environmental considerations that have been taken into account, because then it will allow us to live sustainably in that area. Have we considered the thermal comfort in these buildings? Are the windows large enough to allow in aeration? Do we have enough green space? Have we looked at conservation of water in that footprint, that building space? Have we looked at how the waste will be managed? All these elements or actions that we take contribute to mitigating the impacts of climate change. Because if we do not, for instance, trap water when we have it, then in the dry season we'll be running down to the river to find the water there, when we could have
That's hoping that the river hasn't
there.
dried.
Exactly. So we need to think before the action, because it's not if the weather changes, but when the weather will change. And so as policy, I would like to say that the blueprint for these sustainable communities, having a climate-based project, housing project, or even a community being cognizant of the environment and the conservation of the environment around them allows them to have a better understanding of how to preserve and mitigate the impacts of climate change. Reduce on our energy consumption. Actually, there are two streams that can help us live a low carbon. These are all concepts, but we can unpack them in our day-to-day lives. A low carbon footprint means less energy use and less resource use.
Right.
We should be able to conserve our water. We should be able to use less energy. This is fossil fuel, which if burnt out, contributes to emissions and which exacerbates climate change. So when we are looking at a neighborhood or a community, maybe it's at city level, at sub-county level, even at project level, we need to see that all these housing needs also speak to a reduced energy consumption and a reduced resource consumption.
Right.
How do we reduce energy? We ensure that we have options for transport. We have better cooking modalities in our homes. We have better lighting. We have less movement from one place to another. That's just one example. If we want to reduce on, for instance, resource use, we conserve, for instance, rainwater. We make sure that our waste is well segregated and disposed of and becomes a value chain for another product. There are so many things that can be done, but we must ensure that we start taking concern of our environment at the household level.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Architect Chigundu, the Commissioner mentioned something about blueprints. And your profession, your people, right at the beginning of anything to do with construction, before anything gets put, the foundation gets put into the ground, you probably have been consulted, will have had a hand in, drawing up that plan or something like that. Is your profession aware of this? Are you able to, have you been deliberate about ensuring that the things that you design and advise are thinking about this particular issue? But also, how do you balance that against the reality of the fact that building more sustainable housing and climate smart housing is likely going to be more expensive, and your client is saying, look, you're speaking English, I just want my four walls to be up as quickly as possible, as cheaply as possible. How are you managing that from the architect's perspective?
Well, thank you very much, Winnie. First and foremost, I'm very happy to hear the Commissioner. We seem to be on the same page.
That's encouraging.
Yes. We are speaking the same language. How is the profession prepared? I must say that for some of us who have been around for a very long time, I've been practicing for 26 years now, this was not a very big issue. But the young ones, in their training, it's a big issue, and people are, taking courses into sustainability design, and it's becoming increasingly more important than we've ever thought. About 10 years ago, 15 years ago, sustainability design was an afterthought, an add-on. You come up with a building, how beautiful is it? And then you say, oh, by the way, we need to put in sustainability. Like you corporate organizations say, by the way, after earning, can we do some corporate social responsibility? That is no longer the case. Actually, in construction, because it's thought that globally construction contributes to 40 to 50% in terms of pollution or emission of greenhouse gases. So it is very important that right from the design through to delivery and how it's going to be operated, as an architect, you think about resources, you think about the environment. We think about so many things in design. She has just mentioned about thermal comfort in the room. That's environment. That's because the moment you're required to put on all these things I'm hearing here making noise, you're consuming energy. And like we usually say in Africa, and moreover in Uganda, on the equator, why do you need to air condition?
Right.
So already design-wise, a space like this one has not addressed sustainability issues because we are using more energy than we should actually be using. And we start thinking about those things in terms of design. It should cost ventilate the house, so the house someone doesn't need to have to use a fan, doesn't have to use AC. It should be very healthy for someone to be into that space, enjoying it and feeling that, I'm enjoying the space, I don't go out, I don't have to sit outside because it's too hot inside. All those are sustainability issues.
Yeah.
Now, that's design. But when it comes to delivery of the house, how much do you waste the resources? One of the things that I'm very passionate about in housing, and I believe it's one of the things I saw in the National Planning Authority report, construction costs. There is a lot of waste in the way we construct in Uganda. If you've been to a site, there is what we call half bricks, or the bricks that have been broken as they were being offloaded. They usually almost half of the full ones, and they say, that is waste. The amount of waste debris that's being dumped in swamps, that is waste. That is waste. And every time you destroy a habitat or environment or a swamp like that, that's a water source to someone down the line.
Yeah.
So you're creating problems. So as people involved in construction, I'm a construction supervisor by the nature of my job as an architect. I'm very passionate about seeing the construction waste minimized. But we should also now think about off-site construction, if you have heard of off-site construction, where you need partitions. They don't have to be brick and mortar, because they can be constructed, manufactured in an industry and brought on site, and then you don't have a lot of waste. Most people here will say, my simple house, how do I affect the environment? I have seen people who are having construction sites, individual houses, where the builders don't care. They're dumping the waste on the road. They're dumping the waste around, and it's flying around. Sometimes it's dust. When you produce a lot of dust from your site, that's pollution of the environment. You're making the person next door close their windows because they don't want the dust, to turn on the air conditioning, to turn on the fans. That is, you're causing problems. So as architects, we would like to see the designs better. We would like to see the delivery of the projects better. But then when it comes to the operation, the building itself, should I, as an architect, be concerned at how you operate the building, how you use the building, how much power are you using, how much water are you using? Do you need to use that much water? Can we use solar instead of other energy sources? So as architects, at every stage, we are interested, and we should be interested, and as developers should be, and the leaders, policymakers should be interested from the design, delivery, and operation of a house.
Yeah. I would be interested in knowing what the challenges have been, especially dealing with, I know that for institutional developers like the NSSF and for Wendy here and the things that they do, it might not be a challenge for them, but they don't represent the majority of the construction. Usually that's done at individual level, and so how much do architects struggle to be able to strike that balance with your client who is saying, that looks like it's going to cost more money, I don't care. Is there a place for you to be able to assert yourself and say, look, it's important, you need to pay attention to this, or do you get scared that he might fire you and therefore you do what the client wants?
I will not lie. I have not been in a situation where a client or a developer has given me, either you deliver this, or if you're sticking to your sustainability design issues, walk out of the door. But I guess I would be very concerned if a client gave me such an option. I've been able to work with some clients. I'll tell you, there is a building in International School of Uganda. It's called the Performing Arts Center. I was involved in the design and construction of that building. It's a 3-story building. It has got a theater or an auditorium. That building is not air-conditioned. It's naturally ventilated. And it was because I, as the architect and the owners, we had a meeting of mind and agreed that we do not have to use power to ventilate this building in Uganda. People can sit here, 450 people. It's a theater sitting 450 people. Can sit in here, watch a play, watch a production for 4 hours, and doesn't need to be ventilated. And it's working perfectly.
Regardless of the time of day?
Yes, it's working perfectly. You can go there now. It's a live example. And we try as much as possible. In my practice, we're involved in the construction of schools as well. We don't want to have schools where people are forced to use air conditioners, people are forced to use fans, because we think if it's designed well, it can be done. Residences, houses, this theme is about housing. It is not something that is ideal. But I get so concerned and very disappointed when an owner of a simple 3, 4, 5 bedroom house is using air conditioning. it's very disappointing. It's not necessary in this weather of ours at all. We can design comfortably for thermal comfort in Uganda without using air conditioning.
Right.
We can use all the available light we have without having to turn on the lights during the day. In Uganda, at the equator, why should you turn on lights at midday inside a building?
Yeah.
That's already a sign that the design was very poor and did not address sustainability issues. So, going back to your question, have I been given a situation where you walk out or design? No, I haven't.
Right.
And I hope I don't get into that situation.
We hope you don't. So yeah, it's interesting you should mention that, because the house where I've been staying actually it didn't have air conditioning, but I think it needed it, and I'll explain why. When the person who designed it and built it, they didn't think about these things, obviously. And so what happened is this, that where the sun rises from in the east and where it sets in the west, so the sun sets on the side of the bedrooms in the evening. And what that means is that for the entire afternoon, from about 2 p.m. till 6 p.m. when the sun is going down, it's battering the walls.
Exactly.
So when it gets to about 7:38, when you walk into your bedroom, it's literally, you can feel the heat in there the entire evening. And it just tells you that this person obviously didn't think about that. And you end up in a place where you're thinking, I have to get a fan, like you're saying, or open the windows or whatever, which obviously then becomes a challenge. So I definitely hear you on that. Let me come to you, Wendy, as you know, we engage you and Abby and Daniel, because you're involved in a lot of the development of these projects. You've done some big things with people like the Buganda Kingdom, with NSSF and others. In terms of some of the key things that you have learned from that, what challenges have you faced, especially in the Ugandan context, from what architect Chigodo is saying, in being able to build sustainable projects? Because I'm assuming it's not something that's natural to us. Usually we just build, right? And you're having to be deliberate about thinking about this. How has that been a challenge for you? What's been the experience for your group?
Okay, thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Ben. I'm very glad to be here, and I'm very happy to hear from my partners here, from Commissioner Master, who has been talking about as a government policy makers, starting from the policy to support the development and construction companies as us. Definitely, we as the development and construction company, we are literally the last part of this activity, because we follow the designs already worked out by the architects. We follow the policies made by the government, like from NEMA. You have to make sure that you preserve the wetland so that you can have your complaints when you are doing your developmental activity, and you can construct your houses. Honestly, talking about the challenges you just presented to me, yes, we do have practical challenges, which I do believe not only this particular company, but all the companies in the construction and the development sector or in the housing sector are faced with. They are literally related to climate. They are not related to climate, like directly and indirectly. When today's topic, when we are focusing on the climate change related to this construction and the developmental sector, I have to say that the first thing is, like architects have just introduced, we need more architects, or we need those architects to be well brainstormed and well informed when they are designing a certain product to us, which we call the host topologies. Especially when they have fully understood, for example, the master planning thing. Like just know that information, that story you've given us, like the house orientation literally is conflict with the sunshine, you are receiving during the day. So this is what actually we see that we see that it can be actually bettered, because if we as a construction company can be better supported with more, let's say, climate-friendly design, definitely to help us to do the construction. And the second part is actually I want to echo with what architect just said about the construction waste management part, because we are also constructing projects. And that actually is a big challenge. You have to literally start from brainstorming your casual labor. This, if we go further, actually is related to, let's say, the skilled workers and the preparation of our human resource for this construction sector. You know, climate is a big topic, but when it comes to talk about how can we be more friendly to climate and how can we better prepare ourselves so that we are adapted to the climate change, that takes collective efforts from different sectors. And the skilled workers or well-brainstormed labor can actually help a lot, so that you really don't need to have your set activity and meeting every day to educate and urge them to make sure that you have to sort out the different waste. You know, you literally cannot mix cement with what you are doing, like brick blocks, so that you make sure that they can well sorted and they can be either recycled, or you shall have dumped them in a fixed place so that they won't cause a second time pollution. So that is also the part I think we actually are making a lot of efforts to do that at our own site, but the educational sector or the vocational school, when they are training those people, they can actually do more work so that they can be well trained and educated. Then another point I would like to really point out is that because construction about a house is not only about mortar and block work or cement, it's also related to what just now those good people have shared, like your interior, like the lights, the AC. Actually, now in this world, we have many innovative products. Sometimes even you switch on your particular light for one day, maybe the power it consumed is only like 2 hours of a traditional light. So we are advocating now for more use, like we use more of the LED lights. It helps to save power, definitely. So this comes to the interior part, actually. We have many climate-friendly products. Comes to the kitchen cupboards, wardrobe, even the way you produce your doors. You know, this actually can involve a lot of, let's say, knowledge and help to reduce the pollution and also to make sure that it saves energy when you are utilizing it. So in this part, I think Uganda, this market, we still need a lot of, let's say, work to do, because we don't really have a very mature and completed, we call it industrial chains, starting from the manufacturing sector, which can give us those let's say, environment-friendly products. I can say that within my 5 years staying here in Uganda, I've witnessed the, how do I describe it, tremendous and significant development and progress of this sector. Starting from, we have now, let's say, in different industrial parks, we have factories which produce sanitary items. That is good. But if those sanitary items from the beginning, when they are produced, they can be designed to save more water when you are flushing the toilet. You get it. So this takes, I think, more efforts from different sectors and collective. And basically, those are what now we are faced with. But all in all, we are confident because starting from, like Commissioner Master mentioned, the policymakers are already aware of it, and the architects are also very aware of it. So with collective efforts, I do believe that little by little, those things will actually be bettered.
Right, and that's very encouraging to hear. Let me come to you, Daniel, speaking about this collective effort, because it can't just be done at this level. Eventually, it's got to trickle down to the person who is building the house. In your particular case, it's usually down to the person who is doing the painting. How deliberate are you in terms of being able to liaise with your distribution network and the people who you work with, your dealers and sub-dealers and the people that they eventually sell to be aware of this? Is this something that you're thinking about from the beginning? Do you have any things in place where you're encouraging people to be mindful of what they're doing? Disposal of empty paint cans, for example, paint that gets spilled over, where is that going? Because that obviously could be a problem. Have you guys thought about that in terms of the things that you do? What are you doing in that regard?
Absolutely. It is something that we are very, very particular about. You are aware that Plascon is part of a bigger group called Kansai Paint, which is from Japan. And in Japan, climate change and being cautious of our environment is at the very forefront of everything that they do. And that has trickled down to our business, and it's something that we're very, very deliberate about. I mentioned earlier that we have about 15,000 trained painters, and what we try to do is We don't just allow them to go away with the skill of how to paint and what product to use, but also encourage them to understand the impact their job has on the environment. So we remind them that our tins or our packaging, a lot of it is plastic, so it is reusable and therefore should not be simply dumped into the environment. It can be reused for other purposes, and that is something I'm sure you've seen on the streets, people using our buckets for other purposes. However, on a much bigger scale as Plascon, we are cognizant of the fact that, one, the amount of water that we use in the production of paint and in the production of other products that we deliver into the market is quite significant. And you can't simply say, I will use a lot of that water and let it run out through the system. Yeah. So as Plascon, we make sure that we have a certified water treatment plant to ensure that our water is, part of the water is recycled back into use, and that we do not allow any single chemical to get through the water back into the public channels. And that is something that we believe that all industries, not just in the paint sector, but across the globe, across the country, should be able to implement to ensure that, they contribute to a much cleaner, much safer environment. We also are cognizant of the fact that some of the chemicals that we use in the manufacture and production of paint might be harmful. So as Plascon, we've taken a deliberate step to move away from some of those products. I will confidently tell you that we have all our products as low VOC. VOC is basically volatile organic chemicals. And we know that these, while they make the process of painting a lot easier because they delay or increase the amount of time during which the paint is wet, while those chemicals are good for the person doing the painting to do his work a lot quicker, they have a negative effect on the environment. So we've made sure that all our products are low VOC. We also try to make sure that all our products are, as much as possible, water-based. We're moving further and further away from the solvent-based products because we know that while growing up, we saw that most of the houses were built and painted with oil-based paints. Yeah. And they seem to be convenient because it's easier to wash them or clean them. But our research shows that the solvent-based paints have a long-term effect on the people who are using these environments. So we want to move away from that, and I'll confidently tell you that we've developed technology to ensure that even varnishes, so varnishes for furniture and whatnot, are water-based, which is quite exciting because many people 5 years, 10 years ago never thought that things like this are possible. As Plascon, we're also quite confident of the fact that if everyone contributes a little bit to this conversation, everyone contributes a little bit to this effort, we will go a long way in addressing this challenge.
No, absolutely. I do need to ask you, I know that one of the things that we hear about, especially regarding Plascon, is mosquito repellent paint. I want to know whether that's a marketing gimmick or if that's actually real. But I'll give you a chance to answer that a bit later on. I need to come to Abby. I should also point out, in credit to Plascon, you mentioned your Japanese roots, which are very important. I tweeted something yesterday that really caught my attention from the World Cup. Those who are, Germany fans, so sorry for you about what happened yesterday. But here's something incredible that happened after the Japan-Germany game yesterday. After Japan, shockingly, obviously beat Germany, the Japanese fans stayed behind in the stadium and cleaned up after themselves, removed every single bit of rubbish from that stadium yesterday. I found that absolutely remarkable. In Uganda, Babera busy.
Yeah. I mean, it's just to address that. It's sad that it starts from simple things as throwing things outside of the car.
Yeah.
As the car is moving, someone finishes a bottle of water, and that's why I said that if everyone contributes a small effort, towards this process, we'll be in a much better spot.
Yeah, Architect Guru, go ahead. I should point out as you come through, Architect, that I have a bit of a challenge with people because my car sometimes looks like a garbage bin because I refuse to litter. And so sometimes I take long before I gather all the things to throw them out. So on any given day, you'll find about 7 empty water bottles, chewing gum wrappings that are scattered all over the place until I've been able to gather them or take the car to the washing bay. Because I think to myself that one time I did try to throw out, a chewing gum wrapper, and my conscience just refused and the arm came back inside the car. So it's something that really we must be conscious of, yeah?
That when he says every one of us brings a small little conversation to this, it includes the audience. It includes, we're now talking about policymakers, we're talking about developers, manufacturers, real estate dealers, and us, the designers, but also you as an individual. I talked about dust from a construction site, how it forces your neighbors to go into other modes and then they end up using energy that they shouldn't have used. Same thing with noise pollution. If you're polluting with noise, the environment with noise, that means people have to find other ways of, I either have to drive from that spot and go to Ginger to rest, then that's fuel wasted, that's fuel used, or I have to lock up all my windows. So each one of us, as Wendy said, each one of us, not only us who are seated here, has a contribution to sustainability of the environment.
Absolutely.
It's not only design, it's not only manufacturers, it's not only policymakers, all of us have something to bring.
And we haven't talked about the people who construct and make sure that the water spills into the neighbor's compound and they don't care if the neighbor is aware or not and how to deal with that, which are things that I'm sure Abby doesn't have to worry about because we hold you to a very high standard. And so maybe you might want to share some insights in terms of what are some of your thought processes when you're thinking about your projects and the things that you do? What are you keen on? What are you being deliberate about that, the person who is watching us this afternoon is able to pick from even when they are building like a small 2-bedroomed house somewhere in Gayaza to say, you know what, I can actually take that and be able to use that to make my small contribution.
All right, thank you so much. First and foremost, I am happy to be part of a developer that is a pioneer in this sustainable design everyone is talking about. We are the first developer to get green certification. We have green certification for our Solana housing estate, which the president recently launched. The project Pension Towers we are building, it is on its way to get green certification. Maybe what this green certification means, like for example, for especially Solana, is the fact that the effluent of our sewage treatment plant always goes back to the irrigation of the whole place again. All the stormwater is collected into a pond that is eventually pumped and flowers all the green and maintains it. So we don't need any new water to do that from national water. All our systems are based on gravity, so we minimize the mechanical part, the lights that are put in the house, the materials. So to get a green certification, all these have to be considered and the people who come to do the evaluation ensure that your design is sustainable. And that is the similar to what we're doing in Pension Towers. All the materials that are being put there, we have ensured they are green, for lack of a better word, they are green, and they fall within the sustainable design parameters. Now, having said that, back to your question. From our experiences, we find that for any developer, if you want to be successful, if you want to be good at your game, most of our areas lack physical development plans, but I'm sure there are efforts to make sure all these plans are put in place. But in the absence of that, for developers like us who have large tracts of land, we have over 2,000, by the way, we have over 2,000 acres of land. We have 800 acres in Nsimbe. We have 600 acres in Loboa. We have 468 in Temangalo. And for purposes of land banking, we are not shy to get more. Once we see a strategic plot, we shall definitely go for it. And in all these areas, we have developments. Now, key to this is always the planning. And to start with a good plan is always to have a master plan of what you intend to do with the place. So, what a master plan helps you. It helps you size the amount of amenities you need, the amount of infrastructure, the amount of utilities, the amount of... So everything that the zoning, the green areas, the recreation, depending on the density you want. So key for anything to start in the absence of a physical development plan or in its presence, which should be the first, it's important that you start with a master plan. So a master plan should guide you in what you intend to do. And in so doing, it's not that everything you master plan you have to do, but it kind of gives you a logical way to develop, depending on what the situation is, what the market is saying, and all that. So in all our cases, for example, for our 468 acres in Temangalo, we have a... And so is Solana, which we've just launched. We've just done 300 houses, and that was phase one of a 2,700 residential planned units there. So it's in Simbe. Simbe, we are planning. It's our next project. Simbe was a little bit why we waited to master plan it. It's because of its location and the business case of doing it at this time. But with the Busega and PG Expressway, maybe. It's something we are looking at, and we have some partners from CIG that are doing an overall infrastructure requirement for that whole place, which will feed right into our project. So, of course, after doing the master plan, it's key to understand your market and understand what you can do and what you can't do. So, because having done the master plan, you know the services that have to be done, you know the utilities that have to go there, you know the area, you know that this area doesn't have enough water, that doesn't have enough electricity. So all those should be basically, the master plan should be able to capture that. Then, of course, phasing is very key. Phasing of these projects is very key. What do I start with? Some schools of thought talk about starting with a commercial, retail thing. And, some other schools of thought talk about retail. What comes first? Do you need retail to support the community? Do you need a community to support retail? But in our case, for example, in like Solana, we started with housing simply because of the neighborhood. The neighborhood already has these amenities. There are some communities you go in and they are already advanced or already grown, already mature, for lack of a better word. They have retail centers, they have medical places. So for an area like that, it would be prudent for you to phase, maybe to start now, create